Does this look like the sky or the ocean? To me they look the same. And what if they don't fit anywhere? That's how your mother felt. She felt like she didn't belong.
You said she was dead!
She's dead the day she left his house, all right? Still wants you. Don't you dare! Link, go!
What are we gonna say when we go back?
You into dirt bikes? What's your favorite ride?
Are you Micmac? Link's Micmac.
No, I'm not.
Smigma.
Yeah, we don't need your help.
What's all that?
Regalia. For dancing. A good dancer can make a bit of cash.
You any good?
She ran away. Why didn't you take me with her?
Lincoln, Kulaguaraguijo.
He likes you.
Whatever.
He wants to do your thing.
You don't know how lucky you are that you got somewhere you're going.
How do you say mother?
Engage. Oquist, son.
Engage.
Oquist.
Oh, Noah, Helito. And Bushu and Howell. Hello. And it is time to wake up, as we usually open every program on Wednesday afternoons at 1 p.m. with our theme, Kelly Jackson. But we're going to forgo that today because what you just heard was Philip Lewitsky as Lincoln, and that was audio from the movie that is now playing at the 41st Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. And that title of that film is WILDHOOD, so sort of a play on childhood, because it is an era, it's a coming-of-age story. But before we get to that and talk more about all these great films of Aboriginal, Indigenous, and Native voices that the MSP International Film Festival is highlighting this year, and it's so great to have them back in place. They're downtown Minneapolis on the river now, but you can also access some of these films through a virtual feed, and we'll tell you how to do that as well in just a few minutes here. But I do want to welcome you to this special edition of our program this afternoon, Indigeneity Rising. I'm your host, Roy Taylor, and as always, I am here to provide you with as much information and inspiration, and we're going to do that through film and cinema today. And joining me here in Studio 4 Directions is my wife, and also I was referring to her as the I almost said femme fatale. No, I shouldn't. This is not film noir. This is she is the film femme, as I was referring to her jokingly earlier. So welcome, Catherine. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, good. So, this is the one of many of the editions of this type of program that we've done in the past. We've focused a little bit on television. We've focused on film in the past, commercial offerings, but this is a special time when we are able to see some of these movies that are locally. And then because of COVID over the last couple of years, they had to make them available through a virtual presentation. And so if you need to, if that's the only way that you can see these, if you're listening to us somewhere outside of the Twin Cities, you can go to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Film Society, and you'll see the icon there to click on to get access to the program for the 41st International Film Festival. And then it will tell you how you can actually pay for these films there as well. So we've done that with a few of them, and we've been able to see a couple live, and we're going to hopefully, through the run of the film festival, we'll also be able to see some of these. So let's go ahead and just get started with WILDHOOD, as we said. Catherine, you were asking me, so what is this about? I was kind of saying, well, it almost strikes me as a Wizard of Oz type story because you have these interesting characters. It's a coming of age story. It is also a LGBTQ youth story. So, what was your sense of it as after you got through viewing it?
You talk, Roy, on this show about how you are dedicated to sharing in many forms about Indigenous reality, experience, and identity. And I think this film touched on all three of those: the experience of these young boys, as particularly Link as the main character, as a two-spirit. He's coming from a rough home situation, abusive father, and pursuing his mother, whom he has never met, who he was actually told was dead, which may or may not be a lie. So I don't want to, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, but it goes to the core of his identity as an LGBTQ person, as a two-spirit person, the reality of his home life, and then the experience as he and his younger half-brother meet up with another two-spirit teen who takes them on quite an adventure.
Right. This is, we should warn you that if you're going to be streaming this, that there are sexually intimate scenes. There's profanity. There's also scenes of domestic violence or abuse by a parent to children as well. So just be aware of that. But it was just such a great road trip type of movie, a different movie, I think. At times it is difficult to watch. It's a focus on some of those nations and tribes that we don't often hear about, but because of the Film Board of Canada's efforts in supporting this type of filmmaking and cinema, the Abenaki, the Passamaquoddy, the Penobscot, and what we refer to down here in the lower 48 as the Micmac, but the actual pronunciation is Mi'kmaq. So all of these groups that are up there in the Maritime provinces and up into Maine, as well here in the United States. So that's where the story is set. But there's some wonderful appearances by Indigenous or Native people. The grandmother figure, I couldn't find out what her name was, but she appears in the beginning of the film and then towards the end of the film. And of course, the mother, that the young boy or the teenager is trying to find. And then also a cameo walk on by Michael Gray Eyes, who's actually from out west originally. But so tell us a little bit about trying to weave this story together. And we will leave the surprise about the ending there as he finally makes his way off the, the yellow brick road all the way to find who the wizard is at the end.
So tell me again what your question is there.
Oh, I was just asking. So just, we're trying to weave this together into some kind of conclusion about how we're going to rank it with our 4 arrowheads as well.
I thought it was a super strong performance by the young actors. I loved that. I would give the actors a 4. The movie itself felt a little disjointed at times, a little long, and I always struggle because I want these stories to be told. I want young filmmakers to be seen. and heard. And as we have always said on this show, that it's so important for Indigenous people that there are no stories about us without us. And so to critique the cinematography or the kind of the structure of the film is difficult for me. But I think it could have been, it's a young filmmaker. It's the film has won numerous sort of independent film awards, but I was looking for a little. I think he's got room to grow. Could be a little tighter.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. It does meander a bit, but all of the parts, it's almost like I would describe it as almost like abstract art. Each one of the collection of scenes works on its own, but trying to weave it together into some kind of tapestry that makes sense by the end of it. I think it runs about 108 minutes, so it is quite long. It's getting close to a real studio feature length production, and there were some parts where I think it could have they could have reduced it or cut it out and focused more on the Indigenous performers there as well. But all in all, I thought, and we may disagree on this, but I thought it was a lovely story. There's a scene where the Michael Gray as sort of Pied Piper takes all of the boys. There's another character who is the love interest for Lincoln, and he takes them to a transgender bar, and they're in the process of trying to search for Lincoln's mother. This is one place where she's made a stop along the way, and it's interesting that when he finally does find out where she is and the explanation that's given, it's pretty clear that there are some not only alcohol and chemical dependency issues, but also maybe some mental health and violence and domestic abuse as well. But I think it wraps it up really well with some touching scenes towards the end there with Lincoln and his stepbrother as well. And it ends with a wonderful scene by the love interest. I'm trying to remember what his name was, but he is a fancy dancer. So they're actually dancing on the beach there. Lincoln, who's been kind of distanced from his cultural heritage as a Mi'kmaq, begins to embrace that in this little closing scene. So what do you think, Catherine? What how many arrowheads would you give to this?
First of all, the fancy dancer's name is Pasme.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
and like I said, I would give young actors a 4, and I think I'd give the movie I know we can't show up on the screen 2.5 arrowheads, but I would give it 2.5 arrowheads.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The same thing, maybe a 2.5. I'd like to say 3, but compared, you're kind of judging, particularly when you're looking at other movies within the selections. And so, as you said, for a first-time filmmaker, I think it's an excellent job, and there's a lot of room to grow there. So definitely, if you have the time and you have that occasion to maybe make it to the live screening, this is something that I would encourage you to see, especially if you have adolescents in your life as well, as they're trying to navigate the choices and decisions that they have to make. So, okay, so where are we at? I'm trying to think. Well, we've got a few more minutes here. Why don't we? We've got Mason Mason in the studio with us this afternoon, helping to do all the technological questions. Now, we're going to go on to a movie called The Territory, and I don't believe we have any audio or video for us there, but it's a great selection. But why don't we just talk a little bit about the Film Society and this International Film Festival, and then we'll go to a break, and then we'll come back with our description of The Territory, which is a wonderful film from Brazil. But I'm trying to remember how long we've been doing this. We certainly did it before COVID restrictions took place.
Yeah, I think we've done this show 4 or 5 times, Roy.
Location, sometimes in neighborhoods. And so now that everything has become centralized, they've begun to focus now on this new property. It's a wonderful site. It used to be the old St. Anthony, Maine theaters, the multiplex there, but they're small enough to make it really accessible for art film enthusiasts. And I think they've got some great plans and programs that are upcoming. And I'll tell you a little bit more about something that I attended last Saturday that just really warmed my heart to be able to be there and listen to some great young Native, all-female Indigenous filmmakers. But before we do that, and then we're going to come back in about a minute or so from hearing these messages, and we'll talk a little bit more about the territory. I just want to remind you that this is KFEI Fresh Air Community Radio 90.3 FM HD in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we're streaming live on the web at kfei.org and also on Facebook Live this afternoon. My guest, Catherine Gillis, is in the studio with me this afternoon. We're talking about all things Indigenous and Native at the 41st Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. So we'll be right back with you in just a minute or so.
From 8 to 11 a.m. at the Carpenters Training Center in St. Paul, job seekers can meet with representatives of over 30 union contractors or training centers. At the virtual event, which runs from noon on May 18th until 5 on the 19th, job seekers can submit resumes at careerforcemn.com/metro.
Well, welcome back to Indigeneity Rising on KFEI Fresh Air Community Radio. And speaking of Mi'kmaqs, that is Art Napoleon, who is Mi'kmaq from, I believe it's Labrador. So we like to play him here. Usually in the beginning of the hour, that's the hunting chant song. And so I hope you enjoy that. We're going to bring it down a little soon here. Sometimes there have been occasions when we've been able to play the whole song, so it's wonderful to listen to. That's why you should always keep tuning in here at KFEI to Indigeneity Rising. Hey, I've just got a couple of quick community news. One is a sad note, and one is some great news. So the first one, Michael Hirth, who was previously the director of Bedote, that's the Dakota School here in South Minneapolis, but he was also a longtime Minneapolis-St. Paul or Minneapolis Public Schools Indian education consultant, teacher, principal as well. He was instrumental in getting Anishinaabe Academy started about 2 decades ago, and he passed away just recently. The memorial service was this past weekend, so that's Michael Hirth, or Mike as he was known here in the community. So we're going to send our thoughts and our best wishes out to the family and his survivors as well. And then also just to note, I had her on just a couple of weeks ago, Adriana Goodwin, who is Red Lake, and she was talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women in a special event at the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs. And she informed me that she was notified she was going to be the commencement speaker for her graduating class at the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs. She's got a master's. She'll be receiving a master's in public policy. So she will be the student commencement speaker there as well this coming Saturday. So that's great news, and we extend our congratulations out to her as well. And I told her we were expecting great things from her in the future. So this is just one more step along that path as well. Okay, well, welcome back. We're right in the middle or just getting started talking about the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. I'm joined here in the studio by Catherine Gillis, and we get an opportunity to watch these movies because we're cinephiles, I guess. Well, we're very much interested in a lot of entertainment, and now that it looks like some of the restrictions may begin to be lifted, we hope to be able to make it back into the theater and musical venues and certainly film, Catherine. So Let's talk about this movie that I think we both agree on this, and this might be our winner for the day,
The
The
Territory, and
Territory.
it's a documentary. Roy threw me a bone and let me have a documentary in the mix because this is one of our slight differences. We both love movies. Movies have been a big part of our lives and our relationship for a long time. Um, in fact, that's how we found out that our son needed glasses, as we took him to a movie at the International Film Festival when he was 7 years old, and, actually, we took him to 2, and first night, he read the whole movie, no problem, because we were late and had to sit in the front.
Subtitles.
The subtitles. We had to sit in the front row. It was a lovely film from Japan, and the second night, we were sat in the very back, and it was a lovely film from Sweden, and he couldn't read a thing, so
Well, we were quite a ways from the screen, so
right, because he needed glasses, so
right.
anyway, that aside, The Territory is a wonderful film. It is a documentary. The director is not Indigenous, he is Danish, but he's focused a lot of his work around stories in which, humanity's relationship to the natural world, and, um, WILDHOOD aside, the other films that we've looked at either directly talk about climate change or somehow indirectly touch on climate change. And this is a theme that runs through a lot of Indigenous films, frankly, because it is, Indigenous people are disproportionately affected by climate change. And so The Territory, as a documentary, is a story of the Unuwawa people of Brazil who are trying to protect the rainforest, and yet there are incursions of settlers, if you will, or invaders, as they are called, even on their nightly news programs, as if this is an okay thing, um, into their territory where they are clear cutting trees and essentially trying to turn rainforest into farms. Does that sound familiar to you, Roy?
A little bit of manifest destiny going on there. It's interesting when you hear some of the dialogue. And I should say, Catherine was joking about this being a documentary, but it almost plays out as a feature. I mean, the
Mhm.
way it's structured, and this is one of my pet peeves, is I don't like to see a lot of or hear a lot of music, a musical bed or soundtrack in a documentary. And there's a lot of that in this, particularly when there are these scenes of pristine Amazonian jungle
Mhm.
forest as well. So, but to backtrack there, this took place between the period of I think 2018 through 2020. So it has everything in there, but at the center of it is this small community, and I was been working on trying to remember how to pronounce it. It sounds like you have it down there.
Uh, U Uruwawa, Uruwawa.
Urawawa, yes.
Mhm.
And certain figures, young men that have been tapped as the leadership for the local community, but there's also a non-indigenous or not a member of the tribe there who is an NGO staff person, and she has really invested her life in the protection of not only that part of the rainforest, but also the people there. Brazil has a very interesting, and most of Latin America from south of Mexico, they have these interesting designations of protected territories or autonomous zones, as they may call them. So they're not quite like reservations, what we're familiar with here in North America. The indigenous people are sort of left on their own, and you see that depicted in the film. That there's no help that's coming for them when there are these basically criminal incursions onto their territory. But as I was saying, the dialogue, you have farmers who are wanting to create farms there by illegally squatting on the Urawawa territory. Then you have those who are coming in who want to build towns and create more of an industrial presence there as well. So loggers. And there's a lot of violence when the Urawawa people try and stand up for themselves, and they're not getting much assistance from the government or the police there as well. In fact, we see that one of the scenes where one of the young men is murdered, and as we know up to this point, his
Mhm.
murder has not been not been solved. But tell us a little your reaction to some of those scenes of the jungle life and the people there. Very
There,
simple lifestyle.
right. Well, the Uruwatu Wawa, who once numbered in the thousands, are down to about 200 people right now. And there are two things that really struck me about this movie. And the first is they identify this young 25-year-old or 20-year-old man, Batate, as their leader. The elders come together and they decide that it's time for the next generation to lead the fight and the next generation to carry forth their message. And that just struck me as, as this is an ongoing conversation in our own country about who should lead us forward. And the elders confer on him this designation as their leader, and they follow him and they follow his words of wisdom as he leads them. The second is because they can't get any assistance from local authorities, from the government under President Bolsonaro, they take their fight to the court of international public opinion by using technology. They have drones that fly, and they learn how to fly these drones, and they fly it over their lands, and they can literally show where people are making these incursions with tractors and other, big heavy equipment and cutting down trees. And so they have drone technology and video technology that they then release. And that's is in essence how this movie gets made, is it's using their technology. And they have people contacting them and saying, we'd like to come, news organizations, we'd like to come and videotape or film what you're doing. And they're like, oh, there's no need, we'll do it for you and we'll send you the footage. And which I thought was just actually really kind of charming.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because what you're describing in that second part, where they are basically their own media consultants, but they're also part of the team that's actually going out to do surveying and protection for their lands against these incursions by squatters, by farmers, and by um, industrial interests such as the logging as well. And there is it does take the film itself does take some time to talk with some of those representatives, but and that's where it was really the most troubling part for me, though, because some of those individuals again use the rhetoric of well, the Indians here, they're not cultivating the land, they're not improving it. Um, they have so much of it, and we have so little, and we need to be able to grow, and we need to be able to have access to resources so that we can provide for our families. And so there's certainly, again, it's sort of a land grab, as the Urawawa refer to it, but also when they are killed and their whole way of life is diminished, they do come to that conclusion that it is a path to genocide as well. And particularly when you see President Bolsonaro, who again is famous for denying COVID and any of the vaccines that might be available. We see also that depicted where the Urawawa, several of them have died from contracting COVID-19. So, but Bolsonaro is shown during his campaign actively opposing indigenous people, and so it encourages some of the individuals then to take the steps that they do of invading, sometimes in the middle of the night, the Irawawa land. And so that was just interesting to see, this individual who's known as the Donald Trump of Latin America. So, all right. So, what anything else you want to highlight, or are we ready to give it our arrowhead designation?
Yeah, just one quick point, because you mentioned the COVID. So at one point, Batate and a group of his colleagues amongst the Urawawa capture a logger who is trying to move into their territory, and they capture this man. They sit him down, and then they pull out of their pocket a mask and hand sanitizer and said, "For your protection and ours, we must ask that you protect yourself." and protect us from the COVID-19. So they're very well aware of what's happening in the world. And then their approach to them is like, look, we don't want to hurt you. We don't want to kill you. We just want you to go away. And so then they take the steps to do that. So I
Right.
thought that was that was another salient moment in the film. I
Yeah,
loved it.
that's
Go
a good
ahead.
point because it, so oftentimes when Native people, Indigenous people are simply trying to protect these themselves from these incursions, they're the ones that are villainized then and seen as criminals, and in some instances even as terrorists against the current regime. So, go ahead. You were going to
Oh, yep.
talk
No,
about
it
your.
gets 4 arrowheads from me straight up. I loved this movie. And I loved the people in the movie, and I would, recommend going to see it either in the theater or this is one of those that you can stream virtually in Minnesota.
Right. I agree with you. Four arrowheads for me as well. And it's unfortunate that we weren't able to see this in one of the auditoriums at the Film Society. We did see it. We have a big screen, but still, you can't replace that whole atmosphere of seeing something like this because of the wonderful scenes from the drone cameras, the rivers, the forests, and then you see the deforestation as well. There's some wonderful graphics as well that the NGO representative is showing, and so she shows you how the reservation or the reserve or the autonomous area is marked off within this huge part of Brazil in the Amazon jungle. So I give it heartedly 4 arrowheads as well. And even though we have 2 features, which are usually my favorites as well, this is just a wonderful movie. And it is the soundtrack is spoken in Irawawa, right? And then some Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese as well.
Right, but you do get to hear some indigenous language.
Right. So subtitles, so it's easily accessible to anybody who wants to take the time and make the effort to look at this. All right. So I think that's we've got 2 here. We've got one more, and then we're going to talk about some shorts. And certainly we've got some friends, and we've got a major Hollywood actor who also appeared in a cameo in one of the films. We'll tell you about that as well. Anything else you want to remark about the International Film Festival? I hope my enthusiasm is coming across here as we talk more about this in the next few minutes. But anything else you wanted to highlight? I was trying to think.
I would just say if you have an opportunity to see The Territory, please do.
Okay. All right. Well, I say see all of these films, and I'm going to tell you more about that with one of my friends who was just on last week, and then also about something from West Studi and some wonderful shorts here when we come back. So let's go ahead and we'll take another break, and we'll be right back with you in about a minute. Just to remind you, this is Indigeneity Rising on KFEI, Fresh Air Community Radio and Community Media. We're on Facebook Live this afternoon, and you can catch us streaming on kfai.org. We'll be right back with you in just about a minute.
Programming supported by People's Center Clinics and Services, reminding listeners that getting vaccinated and boosted against COVID-19 can help keep you and your family safe. Same-day and walk-in appointments are available for vaccines and boosters. Listeners can bring their 5 to 17-year-olds to People's Center Clinic in Cedar Riverside for vaccination, too. Appointments also available by calling 612-332-4973 today.
Programming is supported by Hennepin County Child and Teen Checkups, whose free annual checkups can help listeners take control of their health. Annual checkups can identify potential symptoms and get you caught up on immunizations so you stay protected. Free annual checkups available for those under 21 who qualify for medical assistance or Minnesota Care. Visit freechildcheckups.com for more information.
Well, there he is. Jim Boyd, This is Inchlum. He is a Colville tribal Indian. I always say, that I like hearing his voice. He formerly with Exit. Jim is no longer with us, at least in this realm, but he survives through that work with Exit and then also his individual artistry as well. But that's Inchlum by Jim Boyd. Look him up. You'll enjoy that music. One of the first American Indian or Native American rock bands as well. So you'll enjoy that. Welcome back. This is Indigeneity Rising, heard at KFEI Fresh Air Community Radio. And we're in the latter part of our special edition. This is a program we always do every year, but it's part of our ongoing arts and entertainment focus here at Indigeneity Rising when we look at film and TV and popular media as well, and some theater and some authors, novels, poetry, and certainly music with artists, bands, and individual artists. So I'm here in the studio with my wife, Catherine Gillis. We are just finishing up with the last of these major features that we wanted to highlight for you. And so let's go ahead and we'll begin the discussion on that, Catherine. This is one that actually was rivaling the territory as well because it is a feature. I think I probably have a little higher score. I know there were parts of it that were difficult for you, and it may be just a difference in maybe the way I approach and recognize some of these indigenous characters or as archetypes from my own past, and they don't always seem as angry or as surly as maybe you might see them. But this is a story from Bolivia, and I'm talking about is it UTAMA? Is it UTATA or
UTAMA?
UTAMA, UTAMA, and it is primarily in the Quechua indigenous language from Bolivia. There is some Spanish that picks up about halfway through. But for me, this was a wonderful story. Just the opening scenes of the desert landscape, the high desert in Bolivia, and these these elders, a man and woman, husband and wife, Tata, the man, and Sisa, the mother, the grandmother. They're both grandparents, and that'll become obvious or apparent later in the film. But almost for the first 4 or 5 minutes, there's no dialogue between them. They're
Right.
just going about their own, making a meal, getting up and tending to the small llama flock that they have there as well, and just everyday chores around their domicile as well. And then it starts with the Quechua language and just what they're facing there with the lack of water that's becoming apparent. So go ahead. Why don't you pick up from there, Catherine, or maybe tell us a little bit more about how
Right.
this movie
Right.
began to touch you.
Well, you mentioned that there's no dialogue for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the film, but there is a lot of nonverbal communication going on. They know, what they are asking of each other or themselves. So yeah, I mean, I think there is a universal appeal to this story. Any of us who have dealt with aging parents, but set in the highlands of Bolivia. And as you mentioned, this is another one where the direct message, I mean, climate change does have a direct impact on what they're doing, but or their way of life rather. And yet again, it's a very family-oriented story, and it really starts to take off when their grandson comes to visit, and he's brought them some things from the city, and then he sees that there is no water, and they can't even go to the village well and get water anymore. They have to walk even further to the river, and the grandfather is tending this herd of about 50 llamas, which was actually just really interesting to see. You hear a lot about llamas, especially in association with South American countries, but to see him actually herding llama was really interesting.
Or leading them.
Yes.
Actually, they were following him.
Yeah, I guess that's
Let
I'm
me
not
just
sure
check,
who was herding who, but
let
he
me
was
just
hanging
check.
out with the
Is
llamas
this
every
something
day.
we have a video on, Mason?
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and play a little trailer here and hopefully get a little flavor of this particular movie. UTAMA.
Osupe manaña yakukanchu. Mata ruasun hinallapuni kaqtinmi. Aris.
Abuelo, ¿estás bien?
Ñuqapis mana llaqtamanqa ripusumani llaqtitan chinkidakunman mana.
UTAMA. Well, there's a couple of points that I wanted to make about this, partially because of the magical realism that's involved, because to pick up exactly where you left off, Catherine, when the grandson, who is an urbanite, and there's some question about whether he's supposed to be an emissary from his dad or the elderly couple's son, because that's what the grandfather accuses him of, is you're an errand boy, you're a messenger, and I don't even know what you're here for, but I know it probably isn't any good. So kind of that tension, as you say, in the family. And the grandfather is very set in his ways. This is Tata. He's very convinced that he needs to stay no matter what happens, the loss of water, the loss of a way of life, and more members of the local community deserting their traditional homelands for the city. And when the grandson comes, and I should also mention that the grandfather is ill. That starts to become obvious, some kind of respiratory ailment. But the grandson comes, and he's obviously got a warm relationship with his grandmother, Sisa, but it's a little rocky there with the grandfather. And the grandfather starts telling him, the grandson, about how the condor, which is one of the national symbols of Latin American countries, has to fly up to the mountains to retrieve water and then eventually bring it back to the people, but then will sacrifice himself or herself and die. And so that's a running thread when the local community begins to decide they need to send emissaries up to the mountains to try and retrieve water ceremonially in the sacrifice of a llama, and what that's going to provide for the local community. So, and it's unclear, again, because of magical realism, does this really work, or is there something else that's at play here with the grandfather and his beliefs, and that clash that presents with the grandson and essentially the son?
Yeah, I think, one of the indigenous themes that runs through this, at least from my experience, is this desire to remain on one's homeland and to die on one's homeland. The grandfather knows he's ill, doesn't really want to do anything. At one point, the grandson comes back with a medical professional who tells the grandfather, you need treatment. You need to go to the city for treatment. And he doesn't want to do it and he tells his grandson, I am meant to die here. And I think he has this great fear that he will not die with his llamas on his homeland. And so that's another theme that runs through this as well, is this tension between urban and rural, the personal impact of climate change on these farmers and llama llama herders.
Well, he does it though in such an irascible way, grumpy, and
Oh,
in fact, that's the way the grandson refers to him, to his grandmother. Grandpa's grumpy, and all the grandson wants to do is to just take care of them and give them the best opportunity to live out their remaining years as well. So, and the grandfather does start making those predictions about, I'm going to die. I want to die here, and I don't need any kind of intervention. And we do see in the end the few scenes there his demise, but it's there's a redeeming aspect to this in that toward the last few scenes we see storm clouds coming from the mountains to this arid landscape, and then even after all of the titles have run, and there's been a musical outro section, you hear water, rain falling
Yeah.
on the soundtrack in the dark.
Right.
So
Right.
it just is. It's like a prediction, a prophecy, and then it comes true, but at the cost of certain sacrifice and the impact
Right.
on that family as well.
Right. I think there are a couple interesting things too about the relationship. So, the 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 grandmother knows her husband. There's something going on with him. She hasn't quite named it because he's always going off, to with the llamas to graze. She knows that he's probably not well, but the grandson is the one who really gets the insight into it because he goes out to graze with the grandfather. And so at one point the grandmother asks the grandson what's going on with him, and he's like, "No, you have to ask him." And it was this really tender respect thing. It's like, I'm not gonna tell on grandpa. You need to ask him. And that was an understanding of the respect of the relationship between the three of them. The
Right.
other thing I really love about this movie is the cinematography. And it does a wonderful job, I think, of going out far, showing the area, the desert, this little stream that they call the river that runs through it, the desolation, the dust, and yet then they come back in and they show these close-ups of the faces, and those faces tell such wonderful stories in and of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Those they're very iconic images for these people from South America, and the traditional clothing as well. But also these last few scenes with the grandmother and grandfather, just the tenderness and the love. The grandmother finally does have to confront him in a loving way to let him know that she's just concerned about him as well. And you can see the sadness when he does pass on of the grandson and the grandmother as well. But like I say, it does have a redeeming end to the story. And, it does take a little getting used to. There's many of these kind of archetypes of the elderly man who's kind of grumpy, and yet he's got a heart of gold, because he literally gives some gold to his grandson to carry on his needs and his legacy, and gives him his hat as well to shade him. So, all right. So what Arrowhead ranking or rating would you
You know
give
what?
this?
This one really grew on me. I I came into the studio thinking I was gonna give this a 3, maybe a 3.5, and then as we talked about it and I thought about so many of these scenes, I would give it a 4. I would give UTAMA a 4.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I think part of it is, the pacing is slow, but it reflects the life. It reflects the people. Nothing happens up on that step being STEPPE. Nothing happens there quickly. And so, yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 4.
Oh, good. Because I think I originally told you I think it's a 4 as well, and 4 arrowheads, and you said, "What?" And then I was kind of downgrading it maybe to a 3 or 3.5, but if you're gonna go 4, I will say, let's do across the board then. Let's go ahead and give it 4 arrowheads. So this is another one that we heartily recommend if you get the chance to stream it or to take it in. I'm not sure what the options are left. The film festival goes through next week, both live at St. Anthony. Well, I used to call it St. Anthony, Maine, but it's now St. Anthony Film Center there, the Minnesota Film Society. So that's UTAMA, and you did get a chance to hear some of the Quechua language as well. So that's wonderful. Well, I know we've got one more break we have to take, and but let's go ahead and just talk very briefly about these shorts, and then we've got this wonderful film that I had a chance to talk with Rihanna Yazi last week about Winter Love. And while we're not reviewing it right now, we're just going to go ahead and say, because Rihanna is a longtime friend and collaborator and colleague, that you should go ahead and see this, because it has so many wonderful faces, particularly for the Native community, that you will probably recognize. I know at the premiere on Saturday afternoon, Inez Dakota was there, and there might have been others there besides Rihanna, and Inez is in the film as well. It's a Winter of Love. It's kind of referred to as a rom-com, but with Native individuals, and filmed entirely here in Minnesota, and in the middle of wintertime as well. You heard the interview with Rihanna last week, so please check it out. You'll do all of us a great favor by seeing something of the local Native community here in Minnesota. That's Winter Love. I think there's one more showing in Rochester, but you can certainly stream it anytime as well. Go ahead and tell us about Wes Studi makes an appearance here.
There was a movie that is not an Indigenous movie. It's called The Love Song. And then the story of itself is kind of a sweet little movie. But in the middle of it is Wes Studi shows up as a high school friend of the main character. And they kind of had this thing for each other back in the day, but not, it never went anywhere. They both married other people, and now they've both been widowed. And he just, he's a tender, sweet man in this movie. And I always imagine Wes, no matter what character he's playing, I loved him in the Tony Hillerman series and
Right.
a lot of other movies that he's done. I always, no matter what role he's playing, I always see his humanity come through. And that certainly does, even in his little small part in this movie.
Right. Well, yeah, he's just an everyday man who is fulfilling a promise he made to this older woman who he knew from his childhood. But I was expecting, I guess, maybe a Magua to show up from Last of the Mohicans or something like that. But like you say, he just carries this off. He shows, I think, the great talent and extent of his acting ability. So you can check that out. It's called what was it?
It's called A Love Song.
A Love Song, yeah.
Mhm.
With I can't
Yeah.
remember who that was. The main character, but she's a delight too. She's got a very expressive face there
Faye.
as well.
Her name is Faye.
Okay, and then finally about some of these shorts. I'm not a big fan of shorts, but we wanted to highlight them. We always have to run out of time when we're doing this show, but we did have some examples. I don't know if we can play a couple of examples here.
I think what we'll do, we'll go ahead and put the links to some of those trailers in the
Okay,
playlist,
yeah.
since
That sounds
there's
good.
only a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
So.
There's a Yupit, Eye of Both Worlds, which is about an Alaskan Native rapper. And then Udinoviv, that's a Cherokee word for what they've been taught, and that's about Cherokee culture. But there's also Carrying the Fire, which is, again, directed by Ajua Kapashichet, who is former actor here in Minnesota. He's the son of Winona LaDuke, but he's the director of this short film. And then there's Shell River 7, Stop Line 3. That's the wonderful Carrie Pickett. It's a very short film of about 5 minutes as well. And then there's a couple of others under the environmental protection, and then Minnesota Portraits. So check those short films out. You'll be delighted by what you find there. Go ahead. You had last comment.
Mhm. Well, I just, you went to the panel discussion of those 3 Indigenous women filmmakers this weekend. And so it's wonderful to see women Indigenous filmmakers, and that we have Leah Hale and Rihanna Yazi and others, Leah and Rihanna, who live in our midst, be featured.
Yeah, Elizabeth Day was also there
Mhm.
as well. Well, Catherine, we've got to wrap it up here because we've just got a few minutes. But again, we'll just recapitulate what we had. It was the WILDHOOD, which was a what, 2 to 3, I think,
Mhm.
arrowheads.
Yep.
And then the other two, the territory, and then, which was your favorite, which is
Yep, the territory, and then UTAMA.
UTAMA. Those are
So,
both
yep,
4.
those are both
We both
4s.
gave them both 4 arrowheads. So
And
be sure and check this out: the the 41st version of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival, now playing, I believe, through May 22nd. So.
do we have a hot sec to give your shout out to your super fan who was at the film festival this
Oh, sure. I
weekend?
told Louis that he would. I would mention him today as well. He was there at the Indigenous Film panel and loves the wonderful Indigenous Latin American programming that we try and provide here at Indigeneity Rising. Well, like I always say here, I've got to get in my little steel pony and head out. But we will be back here next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And my guest is going to be one of the wonderful Bean sisters. It's Carly Bean. And we're going to be talking about Native Waste Federation. It's a Native organization program that is going to be talking about nonprofits in the Native community. So check that out next week. So, all right. Here he is, Brother Keith. He's going to take us away with Indian Cars. Remember, Indigeneity now, Indigeneity Rising, Indigeneity forever. And I'll see you later at the cinema.
I've been driving in my Indian car to the pound of the wheels drumming in my brain. My dash is dusty, my plates are expired. Please, Mr. Officer, let me explain. I got to make it to a powwow tonight. I'll be singing 49 down by the riverside, looking for sugar, riding in my Indian car. Got my T-bird in the glove box, I ain't got no spare. Got a feather from an eagle, I ain't got no care. The road is empty in my bottle of desire. Daylight is breaking, the sun touches fire. I got to make another powwow tonight. I'll be singing 49 down by the riverside, looking for sugar, riding in my Indian car.